be aware of what's in the one big beautiful bill that got passed by the Senate yesterday. You need to know, as a consumer, as an investor, as a person that lives and breathes in America, you need to know, because these things can affect your money. It may not, some of these things may not affect you directly, but they may affect a loved one or somebody that you know or someone that's a friend of yours, right? I want you to see some of the cracks and some of the issues and some of the potential wins and opportunities that may come out of the bill. Guys, just yesterday, the Senate passed their version of the one big beautiful bill. They just barely passed it by one vote. As you know, there's 2 senators for every state. We have 100 senators in America in total. And the tie-breaking person of any vote that ends up 50-50 is going to be the vice president. Well, yesterday, Vice President J.D. Vance actually was the tie-breaking vote on this Senate's version of the one big beautiful bill. So this bill passed 51-50. Just yesterday, after a historic marathon, 40-something amendments, right? Now, with this passage of the one big beautiful bill in the Senate, because it had some amendments, it has to go back through the House, and the House has to approve it as well. So it's not law yet. Still has to be voted on in the House, and the president still has to sign it. And the president is hoping to sign it by July 4th, which is just a couple of days from now, right? What better theater would it be politically to sign the one big beautiful bill on July 4th? I think that's what President Trump and his camp is really looking forward to. Now, I want to break down some key elements of the one big beautiful bill that passed the Senate, because if you remember, just a few weeks ago, we had the one big beautiful bill that passed the House. Now we have one that passed the Senate, and the Senate is looking for House approval. However, we need to know some of the things that are in this thing in terms of how it will affect us as consumers, as investors, as Americans, what have you. So the first thing that I think is important to point out is the fact that 2017 tax cuts that were about to expire are now going to be extended in the Senate's version of the one big beautiful bill. They're going to be extended until 2035. That means lower income tax rates for most people, especially those that are high earners, right? So we got to be real, right? This bill, the extension of the tax cuts really helps the high earning people in America, even more so than it helps the lower income earners. Now, that's good for some additional cash. We know that, but it also adds trillions of dollars to the national debt. And that's a big point of contention from the other side of the aisle, who is saying, wait a minute, I thought you guys on the right side of the aisle, the Republican side of the aisle, didn't like increasing the national debt, which there's some hard-line Republicans that still don't want to increase the national debt. So that's been a big point of contention about this whole one big beautiful bill, was the fact that it's going to really increase the national debt. Some folks say between $3 and $5 trillion, it's going to bump that thing way up. Now, if you have a job where you get overtime or you get some type of tips, this bill allows you to deduct some of that, up to $12,000 of it every single year off of your taxes. So more take-home pay for the waiters and waitresses and the delivery folks that are out there making money off tips. More take-home for you, right? The bartenders and so forth. But those that work overtime, the nurses, the warehouse workers, the truck drivers, the people that work at the railroad who are working overtime, all of you, it's a win for all the people that are working overtime. That's a good thing. Another important provision or part of this bill, child tax credits, they got tweaked a little bit with the Senate version of the one big beautiful bill. You'll get $2,500 per kid for a few more years. But after the year 2028, that drops down to $2,200 for a child tax credit. So no inflation adjustment up, right? It slowly goes away with this bill, right? So that's a help, not a big game changer, right? But it's a help for some people that have children. But again, hey, I always say you don't want to rely on child tax credits, right? You want to build your own safety net. But the other issue on this particular one big beautiful bill that passed the Senate yesterday is that the state and local tax, what they call the SALT tax, the state and local tax increases up to $40,000, right? From the previous $10,000. Now, so $40,000 state and local tax deduction, but only for 5 years, right? That SALT tax on this particular version of the bill is only going to last 5 years. So that's really going to benefit homeowners in high tax states, you know, the New Jerseys, the Californias, the New Yorks, right? If you're not in one of those high tax states, this one probably doesn't move the needle for you. And then of course you got those MAGA savings accounts, right? That you can open tax free, and you can put in about $5,000 a year into that MAGA savings account. And if you got children, the government throws in an additional additional $1,000 per kid into that account as a match. That's what the MAGA accounts are all about that you hear about, right? It's basically a baby Roth IRA that has a MAGA name thrown on it, right? You want to use it. If this bill passes, you want to use it because free money is free money, right? And then you got the remittance tax that was changed. So the remittance tax, guys, is when you live here in America and you want to send money overseas to, say, a family member. So that's called a remittance tax. You got to pay a tax on that money that you send out. So now with this bill, there's a 3.5% tax on those international money transfers, right? It was a 5%. Now it's 3.5%. So a little bit better, but it's still a pain for people who live in America and want to send money overseas, right? Whether it's 3.5% or 5%. Now it's 3.5% in this particular bill. Now, another thing about this bill is that if you're a bigger business, you get a chance to write off new equipment and new machinery right away instead of having to do that over time. Now, this helps those tech companies and those industrial companies, right? They get help by this, right? So if you're investing in the stock market, maybe you want to watch those type of companies, because if this bill passes, it's going to help and benefit those type of companies. Now, one big thing about this bill is the $900 billion cut from Medicaid. Yep, that's almost $1 trillion being cut off of Medicaid over the next 10 years. Now, obviously, that's going to hurt low-income people. And it means that millions of people could lose coverage, Medicaid coverage. And so if you're a low-income person or you're a person on disability, it could have an effect on you. Not to mention the work requirements for people on Medicaid. This is another big piece of this one big beautiful bill that passed the Senate. So the bill says that if you're between the ages of 19 and 55 and you're not working at least 20 hours a week, you could lose your Medicaid. Now, that might sound fair or not fair, however you sit on the pendulum of whether you agree or disagree with it. Yes, let me know in the comments below, what do you think about the Medicaid cuts and the having to go back to work if you're an able-bodied person? Do you think that's a good thing in the bill, or do you think it's a bad thing? Let me know in the comments below. I'm curious how you think. Now, another provision in this bill, the one big beautiful bill, is the food stamp changes, or they call them SNAP nowadays, the changes in the SNAP program. One of the changes is that states are going to now be zapped and get hit with penalties if they have issues with the SNAP program. And there's more work rules involving SNAP as well. People that are receiving some type of benefit from the government in terms of food stamps, right? So less flexibility. And it may mean that more people are going to fall in the cracks and not have the ability to receive food stamps or SNAP. And so what I'm doing here, guys, is I'm laying this thing out to you. I'm not taking a side one way or the other. I just want you to be aware of what's in the one big beautiful bill that got passed by the Senate yesterday. You need to know, as a consumer, as an investor, as a person that lives and breathes in America, you need to know, because these things can affect your money. It may not, some of these things may not affect you directly, but they may affect a loved one or somebody that you know, or someone that's a friend of yours, right? Somebody in your network of people could be affected by this bill if it turns into law, passes the House and turns into law. Now, another big piece of this bill is the massive spending on border security, right? That's on patrols, border wall security, detention centers, technology to secure the border wall, all that type of stuff. That's huge, right? That's going to affect immigration and ultimately the labor market. So that matters. $350 billion put towards that wall, and securing that wall is a big deal. That's a big piece of our money going towards it. And also in the bill, on the same note, is the fact that ICE's budget goes way up. That's over $100 billion is in this bill for ICE. That's deportations, that's detentions, that's paying to hire new agents. Lots of stuff in terms of ICE is in this bill. If you're an undocumented immigrant, things may get a little tougher for you. But if you're an investor, you got to think about this. As an investor, think about defense, security. Companies that are going to be providing that for America may see a boost in their stock. Just giving you a heads up. Listen, in the stock market, as investors in the stock market, when you see this type of thing happening, the wheels in your mind should be turning about, okay, what does that mean for the companies that may be providing the types of services that are now going to be increasing in dollars? You got to be thinking about that as an investor. This is not to make light of the seriousness of this bill or the people that may be hurt by the bill or the people that may be helped by the bill. It's not to sway one way or the other. It's to say, as an investor, you should be looking at this strategically. And this is one of the reasons I'm explaining to you some things in the bill, because I want you to see some of the cracks and some of the issues and some of the potential wins and opportunities that may come out of the bill. And when you're talking about defense companies and companies that specialize in tech or security, there could be some wins there if you're an investor, right? Because you're talking about military and defense, an increase. Part of this bill is an increase of $150 billion for drone technology and the Pentagon spending, right? That's another big piece, all right? That's your Lockheed, your Raytheon, and your defense ETFs and index funds that are out there. All those things could benefit, right? Some of those wartime type stocks, although we're not technically in a war, so to speak, some of those stocks could see a benefit because of this bill and the passage of the bill, right? And then you got, with the House version of this bill, you had some limiting of tech and AI. But with the Senate version, you see a more open stance towards AI. Just a heads up for you if you're looking at AI and AI stocks. Then also you have these clean energy tax credits being slashed, right? So this emphasis on clean energy the last 3, 4, 5 years, you see some of that going away with the version that was passed by the Senate yesterday. That's your solar energy, your wind energy, your EV, right? Electric vehicle energy, right? All of those companies and people that sell that stuff, they're going to see it. They're going to lose a little momentum potentially if this bill passes the House. Now, not to mention, this is one that people didn't really know much about, but there's a $50 billion in this bill to save some rural hospitals that may be out in more remote areas of America. There's a piece of this bill, or at least provisions in this bill, to save face for a lot of them. Good move if you live in a small town, which there are still a lot of people that don't live in the top 10, 20 metropolitan areas of America. There's still lots of folks in rural areas and small, more rural counties in America. Lots of Americans are still there. And so this sort of helps them out as well. Also, there's a tax reduction that is reduced with this bill for the more elite universities that have I think it's an endowment of over $5 billion. If your endowment is over $5 billion and you have under 3,000 students, this bill says that we're going to now tax you 1.5%. Now look, for everyday people, not a big deal. But this provision in this bill sort of sends a message to, your Princetons and your Harvards that are out there, right? Saying, hey, we're going to tax you if you don't have a big enrollment and you have a sort of a larger endowment of over $5 billion or more. Also, not to mention, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau also is going to see a cut in this particular bill, which translation, that sort of means that there's going to be fewer people, if this bill passes, fewer people watching out for the shady folks out there, right? The bogus credit schemes and all that. So just be aware of that as well, right? If this bill passes, there's going to be less money put towards watching some of that stuff. So just be aware of that as a consumer, as an investor, as a person that's watching YouTube and podcasts and listening to podcasts. You need to be aware that maybe if this bill passes, there's going to be less money for those type of provisions set aside to monitor and check on that stuff. Just be aware. Now, one of the big areas of this, guys, is the debt ceiling. This bill is going to raise the debt ceiling by $5 trillion. If you pay attention to any of this stuff, you know that every couple of years, the Democrats and the Republicans are fighting against raising the debt ceiling, right? Obviously, they're going to raise the national debt. The national debt's going to go up because of this bill if it passes. But they're saying in this bill, we're going to raise the debt ceiling automatically. So we won't fuss and fight about it over the next 2 or 3 years, but 3 or 4 years later, they'll be fussing and fighting about it again. All that means is this: when the debt ceiling goes up by this $5 trillion, if this bill passes, it means the government can borrow a whole lot more money, basically, which means that it's definitely going to push the national debt towards 40 trillion or even over 40 trillion by probably the year 2029, 2030. Now, this bill is called the One Big Beautiful Bill, but here's the deal. It is a massive bill. It's a huge bill. It's got something for everybody to like, and it's probably got something for everybody to not like. If you're a worker and you're working overtime or you're getting tips, hooray, good for you, fantastic. This is going to help you out. If you're an investor, maybe you want to focus on more of the fossil fuels and less on the solar and the wind energy stuff. Maybe you want to focus on some of the defense stocks, right? Maybe big business and AI, because they stand to all benefit from this One Big Beautiful Bill. But if you depend on food stamps or SNAP and Medicaid and those types of things, or even affordable health care, right? those things could be in danger for you, right? Or there may be certain more strict regulations and provisions that you need to be doing to make sure you qualify for those things. And you should be thinking about things like inflation. You should be thinking about things like taxes. You should be thinking about things like interest rates and what the Fed is doing with the Fed funds rate. All those things are things that as investors, as Americans, as consumers, we should be thinking about. And this is, hey, on this channel, we talk money. But listen, we also talk what's going on around us that could affect our money. And these things that are happening, this bill in particular, it could have a major effect on our money and the money of people that we love. So guys, be looking out over the next day or two to see what happens with this bill in the House of Representatives. Let's see if they pass the bill or they don't. Are you in favor of the bill or are you not in favor of the bill? Let me know in the comments below. So hey guys, I just wanted to give you a quick update because this is pretty big news because it could pass the House. And if it passes the House, it's going to be signed into law shortly. Could be a couple of days. Guys, do me a favor, drop me a comment below and share this video with someone else who may need to be in the know. If you got value from this video, let me know in the comments below. Just say, hey, I got value. I really appreciate it. And if you're not a subscriber to my channel, please consider subscribing. Look, the absolute best person who's going to take care of the old you is the young you. Guys, take good care of yourself and take care of other people. Until the next video, peace.